بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معاد خير واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. Alright, so last time we talked about Riyadh الصالحين a little bit, and so I want to talk a little bit about Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he started he began to seek knowledge at a later age. I don't know exactly how old he was when he started, but he didn't start at a very young age, as most scholars do. Rather, when he started, he determined that he wanted to become a scholar as quick as possible. So for 4 years, he said he did not sleep, he said he didn't lay down, and he didn't fall asleep on purpose. So if he ever fell asleep in those 4 years, it was by accident. And he didn't lay down, meaning like if he fell asleep, he would fall asleep sitting down, not laying down. And I personally, let alone 4 years. So subhanAllah, the
4 years or
4?
4 years.
4. So the amount of dedication Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi had for this deen was incredible. And also Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi wrote a lot of books. He only lived for 45 years. He died when he was 45. He never got married. And he wrote a lot of books. Some scholars say like the amount of books he has written, like it doesn't make sense for the amount of time that he had to write it, because he wrote so many books, subhanAllah. Some of the most prominent of his books are an explanation of Sahih Muslim, and that is considered till this day probably one of the best explanations of Sahih Muslim. A lot of scholars don't attempt to explain Sahih Muslim because he did such a good job. And the same thing with Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahmatullahi alayhi, where he wrote an explanation of Imam Bukhari, of Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari. Also, Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he wrote this book, Riyadh al-Salihin, and the 40 hadith of the Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, which we just finished. And the goal that he mentions of writing this book, rahmatullahi alayhi, was to give a brief summary of what it is that we have to do as Muslims to get to the next life, to get to Jannah. So he goes through every aspect of life as much as possible in being as brief as possible. So he's summarizing, and he tries to only put in here a hadith that are strong, a hadith that are considered to be sahih by the majority of scholars. So as to get away from, bringing in something that could be possibly doubtful. So with this book, it is considered to be one of the most summarized hadith books in regards to what it is that we're supposed to do towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And another aspect that's important that he wanted us to get from understanding this book, rahmatullahi alayhi, was the aspect. Yeah, sure.
Some of reading from there is fine, otherwise I will read from here.
Yeah, you can read.
Okay, brother. So we have to go to page number 13.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a different book.
So this is the book that you send a link to.
Yeah, but I have a different copy, so I don't know the page.
Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, it says chapter 1, sincerity and significance of intention for all action.
Well, let's read the Arabic.
So Babul Ikhlas.
But does it say Kitab al-Ma'murat?
وقدار النبية في الجميع الأعمال والأقوال والأحوال البارزة والخفية.
So باب الإخلاص وإحضار النية في جميع الأعمال والأقوال البارزة والخفية.
Yeah.
Okay, so rahmatullahi alayhi, he again gives his opinion in the name of the chapter. So he says the chapter of Ikhlas. Ikhlas, when you say something has khalas or khalis or shay, is the purity of it. So the essence of it. Okay? So the essence of something is what we're calling ikhlas. And ikhlas is basically the sincerity or the purity of actions. And this purity is the purity in your intention. The purity such that it is only for Allah. Such that it is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So that's the first aspect that he's mentioning about the chapter. And then he also mentions وَإِحْضَارُ النِّيَّةِ or وَإِحْضَارِ النِّيَّةِ, right? And to bring or to make present your intention. في جميع الأعمال والأقوال البارزة والخفية. In all of the things that you do and all of the things that you say, whether it is the hidden actions or the apparent actions. So he's saying that we have to have the proper intentions, we have to have the proper sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we do and everything that we say, right? And then he also mentions that it has to be in regards to our actions that are hidden as well as the actions that are apparent. قال الله تعالى
قال الله تعالى وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين حنفاء ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة وذلك دين القيمة.
ويقيموا الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة وذلك دين
القيمة.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and again, his methodology in writing this book is that he brings the ayat of the Quran first. Why the ayat of the Quran before hadith? Because the ayat of Quran are the highest level of authenticity. The highest level of authenticity, and it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exactly what he said. Okay? Whereas a hadith, they both are legislation. They are both legislation. But a hadith is something the Prophet ﷺ said, although it is also revelation. But the level of ta'abbud in Quran is higher than the level of hadith. So anyways, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَمَا أُمِرُوا. The only thing that they were ordered to do is لِيَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ, is to worship Allah with complete sincerity in this religion, right? Complete sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this religion, meaning that we have ordered to worship Allah and only Allah in this deen. Hunafa. Hunafa, so Hanif, they call someone Hanif who is bow-legged, somebody whose legs or feet are like this. Why? Because Hanif basically means crooked. Okay? So Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called him Hanif. Why? Because he was crooked away from what his people were doing. And his people were worshipping idols, right? And other than Allah. And so therefore, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was crooked away from that, but therefore in the right path. So Hanif, meaning crooked away from the wrong path. Right? وَيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ, and they've been ordered to do iqamat al-salah, and we talked about iqamat al-salah and how that is performing salah in every aspect that is required for it. Having the proper knowledge for salah, doing the salah in the correct time, doing salah in the correct way, calling people to salah, so on and so forth, right? وَيُؤْتُ الزَّكَاةِ, and then they give the zakah the correct way, the proper way, in a beautiful way, right? وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ, and that is the perfect steadfast deen. That is the perfect steadfast deen. So the Mawdu' shahid, the point that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering us to worship Him with complete sincerity, and with that we are worshiping Him and only Him, right? With ikhlas. وقال الله تعالى
وقال الله تعالى لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها.
Are you missing an ayah?
ولكن
Are you missing an ayah?
يناله التقوى
Is there missing an ayah?
منكم.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, continue.
Okay, منكم الحج. وقال تعالى.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says here, لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. Now what's interesting is this copy that I have, yeah, this is wrong. It's okay. Anyways, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا, that the sacrifice that you sacrifice, right? Allah does not receive, it doesn't get to Allah its blood nor its meat, right? The thing that gets to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our taqwa, right? What is taqwa?
Shielding yourself from Allah, from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through avoiding evil and doing good.
Right. So taqwa is to shield yourself from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing good and staying away from evil. So that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala receives from us, is our taqwa. Now, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says here that He receives our taqwa. Does that mean Allah benefits from our taqwa? No, of course not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above any benefit from us, any need from us, so on and so forth. Rather, this taqwa is what it is asked for from us, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is requiring from us to have taqwa. It's not about the actual action. It's about what's in your heart. Right? A lot of times people focus on actions. They focus on, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Right? Which, don't get me wrong, it's not bad. But the thing that is important to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what's in your heart. The action is only a result of what is in your heart. Right? Continue.
Okay. So then, وقال تعالى قل إن تخفوا ما في صدوركم أو تبدوه يعلموه الله.
يعلمه الله. يعلمه
Surah
الله.
Al-Imran, ayah 29.
Right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says here that if you were to hide what is in your heart, or you make it apparent what's in your heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it whether you hide it or you make it apparent. So it's important to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of exactly what's in our hearts. So that is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants action from us. That is the place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for good deeds from. He's looking for these good deeds from our hearts. Okay? Anyone else want to read?
وعن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب بن نفيل بن عبد العزى بن رياح بن عبد الله بن قرط بن زراح بن عدي بن كعب بن لؤي بن غالب القرشي العدوي رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه متفق على صحته.
That's it.
There's more.
رواه إمام المحدثين أبو عبد الله محمد بن إسماعيل بن إبراهيم المغيرة ابن بردزبة البخاري الجعفي أبو الحسين مسلم الحجاج بن مسلم القشيري النيسابوري في صحيحيهما اللذين هما أصح الكتب المصنفة. So, this hadith, we talked about it in the 40 hadith, right? This was the first hadith in the 40 hadith, and this is the first hadith here. You're going to find this hadith in a lot of hadith books as the first hadith, right? And it's not the first hadith in Bukhari, but I believe it's the first one in Muslim.
But this was also first hadith in our 40 hadith also, right?
Yes.
إنما أعمال بالنيات.
Yes. So, the additional thing that he's bringing here in regards to this hadith, in addition to what we've already talked about, is he mentions here his full lineage, and the reason he's mentioning that is to show that he meets the Prophet ﷺ, I believe at Ka'b or Lu'ay, I'm not sure. So where he's like a distant cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's the point of mentioning the lineage and how his lineage is noble. The lineage of Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. And he says that I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that our actions are judged by your intentions. So again, the The focus of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on our actions is our intentions. Right? The intentions is what matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is where everything is. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. And you get what you intend. Right? So whatever it is that you're intending, that is the result you're going to get. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Whoever makes hijrah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, then his hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. Meaning, he's getting Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا. And whoever's hijrah is migration, by the way. I don't know if I explained that. Whoever his hijrah is for this dunya, for something that they're trying to achieve or receive in this dunya, if that's why they're making hijrah, right? Or to get married, then his hijrah is for whatever he made his hijrah for, right? So, now understand, again, it's okay to migrate for the dunya, right? That's not necessarily something bad, okay? I mean, unless you're doing something haram, then it's bad. But that's not something bad, necessarily bad, to migrate for the dunya. And it's not something necessarily bad to migrate to get married, right? But if that is your intention, then that's all you're getting, right? And obviously this is talking about the hijrah that the Prophet ﷺ made from Mecca to Medina, right? And that hijrah was the best and most important hijrah. Right? That hijrah, it was very, very clear that the Prophet ﷺ, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ to leave Mecca, and He told all of the companions to leave Mecca. So it was an obligation on everyone to leave Mecca, right? And to go to Medina. This was an obligation on everybody. It wasn't optional. Now, because there's this obligation, okay, I have an opportunity to get married in Medina. Should I go to Medina to get married, or should I go to Medina for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you know what I'm saying? So that's the thing, is that we want to make sure that our actions are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not for some other dunya thing. So that you can get rewarded for it. Right? Why does it make sense to do such a big thing and you're doing it for the dunya? Right? If you're going to do something that's supposed to be, it's better to do it for Allah, do it for Allah, so that you can get rewarded for it. Correct your intentions. And a believer is constantly correcting his intentions. He's constantly trying to improve his intentions to make sure that whatever he's doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then he says, Muttafaqun alayh. This hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. And then he mentions who is Bukhari and who is Muslim. Bukhari is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim, right? Ibn Mughira ibn Bardizbah. Bardizbah is the one who became Muslim, right? And they're from southern Russia, Bukhara, right? So even that area is still Muslim till this day. But I think a significant thing to understand here is how he was what do you call it?
I was opening the app and it had ads, I swear.
So the issue here, or the thing that's important to note, is that he was non-Arab, right? And he was considered to be one of the biggest scholars in the history of Islam, right? And why is that important to know? Especially for us, most of us are non-Arabs, right? So we shouldn't have this mentality that, oh, I can't learn Islam because I don't speak Arabic, or I can't learn because I don't speak Arabic. And Imam Sibawayh, for example, right? Imam Sibawayh was the biggest scholar in the history of Islam in Arabic. He was the biggest scholar in Arabic, and he was not Arab, right? When he went to learn with a sheikh, the sheikh butchered him because his Arabic was so bad. So he got mad and said, I'm going to learn Arabic so good so nobody can ever talk to me like that again. So he became the biggest scholar in the history of Islam in Arabic. They call him the father of Arabic, and he's not Arab, right? So it shouldn't be something to hold you back, to say, oh, I don't know Arabic, this and that, right? Rather, it's this, like, these stories are inspirational. Imam Bukhari is considered to be the most knowledgeable, right, of the scholars in regards to hadith. They say there's not a hadith, or they say if Imam Bukhari said he doesn't know a hadith, it means it doesn't exist. Like, I'm not just talking about strong hadith, I'm talking about weak, everything. They say if he said he doesn't know it, it means it doesn't exist. And there's only two people in the history of Islam that they said that about. Imam Bukhari and Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullah alayhi. Right? So, this is hopefully something inspirational for us to learn our deen. And Imam Muslim, rahmatullah alayhi, also not an Arab, right? He was from Naysabur, which I believe is in Persia somewhere. And he was also considered one of the biggest scholars in the history of Islam and Hadith. He was a contemporary of Imam Bukhari. They were colleagues, right? Although they learned from each other. And Imam Bukhari, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, a Hadith scholar will never be a Hadith scholar until he learns from who is above him, and who is below him, and who is at the same level as him. So he said, there's no way you can become a scholar until you're learning from everyone. So it was a very common practice for the scholars to learn from everyone, right? They did not discriminate who they learned from. Imam Bukhari, rahmatullahi alayhi, just to mention, some of the aspects of how incredible he was. They would go to these classes and they would sit with this big sheikh, and the sheikh would come from a far distance, for example, and there would be thousands of students there. So you'd have the sheikh speaking, and they didn't have microphones, so you'd have somebody at one point in the crowd say exactly what the sheikh said, so the people behind him can hear it. And then they would do that until it goes to the end of the crowd. Right? So everybody's hearing what the sheikh said. So Imam Bukhari, he goes to the sitting, and he's just sitting there. No notes, no nothing. And everybody is there taking notes, like writing down everything the sheikh is saying. Imam Bukhari's not taking any notes. So they come and ask him later on, mention everything the sheikh said from beginning to end. He memorized it on the spot. Right? So subhanAllah, Allah, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something I have tried to figure out all my life how to memorize, because when I was younger, my brothers were always better than me in memorizing. So I always felt like I was the one behind. So I was always behind. And I've always had a problem with memorizing. Right? Not only is it hard, I don't like it. Right? I vehemently really don't like it. Right? But I've done a lot of research to understand how these mashayikh memorize so good. And I found that a lot of them, they weren't born like that. They weren't born like with that amazing memory, where they were memorizing like crazy. A lot of them had slow memory, and they eventually got it, right? And the other thing that I've realized with that, so therefore I've realized that it's acquired. It's not something that you just wake up and you have it. Although there are some people, they're born with photographic memory, right? But there's a lot of scholars who didn't have it at a young age, and then they eventually developed photographic memory. Then the other aspect to this that I've realized with the scholars, they all attribute the amazing memory to Allah. They all say that it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not something that they necessarily worked for. Right? Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, um, he usually would read something one time. He would have to cover one page when he's reading this page, so he doesn't mix between the two, because he only reads it one time and then he covers this and reads that one time, and then that's it. He memorized it, right? So now he was running into a problem where he had to read it 2 times. Okay, he had to read the page 2 times in order for him to memorize it. So he goes to a Sheikh Waqi', and he wrote a poetry about it. He says, "شكوت إلى وكيع سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي." So I told Waqi' about my problem with memorizing. So Waqi' told him, rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'an, Waqi' told him to leave sins. وأخبرني بأن العلم نور ونور الله لا يهدى لعاصي. And he told me that this knowledge is light, is Allah's light. And Allah does not give His light to a sinner. Allah doesn't give His light to a sinner. So understand that seeking knowledge, right? Hopefully, we have an understanding of this deen that we can save ourselves from the fire with. May Allah make us from the people of knowledge. وعن أم المؤمنين
وعن أم المؤمنين أم عبد الله عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يغزو جيش الكعبة فإذا كانوا ببيداء من الأرض يخسف بأولهم وآخرهم قالت قلت يا رسول الله كيف يخسف بأولهم وآخرهم وفيهم أسواقهم ومن ليس منهم قال يخسف بأولهم وآخرهم ثم يبعثون على نياتهم متفق عليه هذا لفظ البخاري.
So al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu anha, the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, one of the 6 people who narrated the most hadith, she was considered to be one of the most knowledgeable of the companions. She was in the circle of what is that called? Consultancy towards all of the khulafa, right? She was consulting all of the khulafa. Radiallahu anha. She was extremely intelligent, and she showed her intelligence from a very young age. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet ﷺ to marry her. Because there's one aspect that all of the companions were constantly conveying about the Prophet ﷺ, but there's another aspect that they could not convey in the private life of his own home. So the Prophet ﷺ needed someone that was extremely intelligent and very ready to convey the message of the Prophet ﷺ of his private life, right? And also it was very helpful that she was very young, because her being young, she lived for a long time after the Prophet ﷺ and was able to convey that message for a very long time. She had a lot of students, right? Some of those students, some of them were her nephews, right? Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, for example. Urwa ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, right? And many others. So, like these two, Abdullah and Urwa, were some of the youngest of the companions, right? And they learned a lot from Aisha radiallahu anha, even though Abdullah ibn Zubayr specifically was also learning a lot from the Prophet ﷺ. But there was a lot that they got from Aisha radiallahu anha as well. And many other companions and tabi'een who learned from Aisha radiallahu anha, and she benefited the ummah until she died radiallahu anha, and we continue to talk about her in all of her hadith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we all know, saved her honor in the Quran in Surah An-Nur, right? Where people were talking bad about her. People were saying that she did this and she did that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved her honor, radiallahu anha wa arda. So she narrates in this hadith, she says that the Prophet ﷺ said, يَغْزُو جَيْشٌ الْكَعْبَةِ. And this is at the end of time, that there's going to be an army that will go to destroy the Kaaba. Right? Is this something that happened yet? No. It hasn't happened yet. But this is something that will happen, that there's an army that's going to go to try to destroy the Kaaba. Right? فَإِذَا كَانُوا بِبَيْدَاءَ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. بَيْدَاء مِنَ الْأَرْض is a specific area that is in Mecca, I believe. When they get to that point in that area, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the earth and eat and have the earth eat them all. Like they will all fall into the earth. Right? So Aisha radiallahu anha, the intelligent Sahabiyya radiallahu anha that she was, she says, كيف يخسف بأولهم وآخرهم وفيهم أسواقهم ومن ليس منهم. Right? She said, how is it Allah is going to destroy all of them, but then there's some of them that are not there for war? Right? Because in every army, at least this is how it was then, every army had people who were doing things for the army that they weren't a part of the army. Like you had people who cooked food for the army. You had people who were medics for the army. Right? You still have these things today, right? You have people, who were selling things to the army. Right? Vendors. Right? So there was a lot of people that were not fighting, that's a part of the army, but they're just going just because that's their job or whatever. Right? So you kind of have the same type of thing in armies today. Right? So Aisha radiallahu anha said, how are these people also going to be destroyed? Because they're not there to fight. They're not there to destroy the Kaaba. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, يُخْسَفُ بِأَوَّلِهِمْ وَآخِرِهِمْ ثُمَّ يُبْعَثُونَ عَلَى نِيَّتِهِمْ. So all of them will be destroyed together, but they're going to be resurrected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on their intentions. So if their intention was to destroy the Kaaba, then they're going to get their judgment for that if their intention good, inshallah. So the point is to understand everyone is rewarded or punished based on their intention. Right? It's not necessarily the exact action. Okay? So so a question that comes from this: if someone is doing something wrong, okay, and they say my intention is actually something good, do they get rewarded for that action, or would they get punished for it? Say that again.
Intention.
So do they get rewarded or punished? So the action is wrong, it's bad, right? But
I
their
think they will
intention,
reward it even with the intention is right, and they can reward it for their intention, but they can punish for their action. Two-way traffic.
okay. Anybody else? So, it is our obligation to know what's right and what's wrong. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say, you know, I don't really know that much about Islam, and I see in the masajid they pray 4 rak'ahs for dhuhr. But I know I'm like a really bad person. I'm not that good. So I think it's better for me if I pray 5 rak'ahs. I'll pray 5. Because that way I can make up for all my messed upness. Right? So I'm gonna pray 5 rak'ahs. So I'm trying to do something better for Allah. I have the right intention, right? So is that an okay action? Right. An action, and what is the conditions for an action to be accepted? Exactly. There's a hadith. I'm trying to see if it is in here.
So it is not a good, it is a wrong action he is doing, it he will not reward it for praying 5 instead of 4.
Yes. So a
right?
bad action, you don't get rewarded for that. Even if your intention is good, because the intention is not enough.
But you get say for that though. Like you
Yes,
get,
of course. You get bad deeds
So can you
because
explain?
the intention is not enough.
So can you explain, please, brother? I didn't understand. So 5 rakat instead of 4, he will not get rewarded for it. This is the wrong action, right?
Yes. Even though he has the right intention, that's not enough for him to get rewarded. He has to also be on the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in order to get rewarded for a good deed. Yes, the knowledge is important. Now, okay, if it's an ignorant person and he has valid excuses for not getting knowledge, right? Then Allah judges that. But that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers. But it is not an excuse for someone to say, I didn't have the knowledge. It's not a good excuse. Again, Allah is the judge, but in general terms, it's not a good excuse to say I don't have knowledge. And this is why it is so important for us to have knowledge in everything that we're doing. So the hadith that I wanted to mention, it's not in this chapter, is the hadith of the 3 people, right? They came to the Prophet's wives asking them about some of the things the Prophet ﷺ does in private. So then when they heard about what the Prophet ﷺ does, they were like, that's not that much. So they said, oh, but this is the Prophet ﷺ, Allah forgave everything that he's going to do. So they said, one of them said, he's going to pray all night, every night for the rest of his life. He's never going to sleep at night again. The second person said he's going to fast every day for the rest of his life. And the third person said he's never going to get married. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he heard about this. Now, again, it sounds innocent and it sounds good intentions. Right? But again, the intentions are not good enough. The Prophet ﷺ, he heard about this, and he asked them if it was true. They said yes. The Prophet ﷺ said, as for me, I pray at night and I sleep at night. I fast and I break my fast. And he said, and I get married. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي, and whoever turns away from my sunnah is not from amongst me. Is not from amongst me. So it's very important that we understand the sunnah with our intentions, because the intentions in itself is not enough. Next hadith. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها as well.
وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا هجرة بعد الفتح ولكن جهاد ونية فإن استنفرتم فانفروا متفق عليه.
فإذا استنفرتم. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrates this hadith as well, that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا هجرة بعد الفتح. There is no hijrah. Which hijrah? The first hijrah. After Fath. Meaning after the opening of Mecca. Meaning it's not an obligation anymore for people in Mecca to leave Mecca to go to Medina. Right? However, the hijrah is open until the day of judgment. There's another hadith in that regards that hijrah is open until the day of judgment. And what is hijrah? Hijrah is to leave something for Allah. Hijrah is to leave something for Allah. So leaving something for Allah is in regards to leaving muharramat, leaving something that's haram, leaving a haram place, leaving any haram action, right? Does that make sense? And obviously the best hijrah is to leave a haram place to go to a halal place. Okay? One question one might ask is it permissible to live in a non-Muslim country like we do in America? Right? Because there is a hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ, he says something to the effect of that he is أنا بريء ممن عاش بين ظهراني الكفار. Right? I am, I disown. I disown everyone who lives between the kuffar, the disbelievers. Now, so this is a general concept. That in general, it is haram to live in a non-Muslim country, right? However, there can be reasons that make it halal, right? And this is a long discussion between scholars. By the way, there's no difference of opinion between the scholars that it's haram to live in a non-Muslim country, as the general principle. All scholars agree on this, right? However, there are things that can take you away from this, or that make it halal, right? The height of that, or the biggest thing within that is da'wah, is calling people to Islam. So, because it is an important aspect in Islam to be able to call people to Islam, right? There are other things like seeking knowledge, even if it's dunya knowledge, right? It is permissible to go to a non-Muslim country to seek knowledge. There are other things of family. There are other aspects of there's quite a few things within that some things may not be coming to mind right now, but nonetheless, the general concept is that it's haram, but then it can be halal for certain circumstances, certain things. Say that again.
Sustenance be one of them, or no?
For sustenance.
If your intention is well to social,
I don't think we fit into any of those categories.
Sustenance, like
To work. Yeah.
Work.
To make money for dunya.
Last life the suspicion.
I can't see how that's
Yeah.
So that we all fit in that category, unfortunately.
Well, the thing is this. The thing that we all need to be involved in is da'wah, right? That should be the first step, okay? because we're here, everyone has an obligation to call to Islam. It doesn't mean that you have to be doing it 24 hours a day, every day. It just means you have to have some type of foot in that, right? And then the other aspect is, this has to be a constant question. Are you in the place that is most pleasing to Allah? This has to be something that's constant, right? Why? Because again, intentions, right? Your intentions, you constantly have to correct them, right? And your intentions are with everything, with my job, with my house, with my how I'm coming to the masjid, with every single thing that I'm doing on a daily basis. You have to constantly ask yourself, am I doing this for Allah? Does Allah want me to do it like this? Everything, right? So if we're constantly doing this, then Allah is going to guide us to the right path. Doesn't matter where it is. And you have to be open to whatever that path is. But this has to be a constant question that you're constantly asking yourself. Is this right and pleasing to Allah? And is it what Allah wants from me? Okay? Because everybody has different circumstances, right? We can't analyze everybody's circumstance one by one, little by little, right? Rather, every person has to do that for themselves all the time. All the time. You have to constantly, and why is it that we have these depression issues, or these I feel bad inside issues? Because there's a battle. You might know I'm doing this thing that's wrong, but I don't really want to change it. I like it. So then because you have that battle, this is what's happening inside of you, and it hurts you. But when you start to become honest with yourself and start to work towards the thing that is most pleasing to Allah, then you don't have those battles. Then you become satisfied with what's going on in yourself, right? So therefore, you don't have those depression issues. You don't have those, I feel bad issues, right? More so, the issues that you have is, this particular thing is difficult, but I need to be patient. I need to have sabr. That's the type of issues a believer has, right? Not the type of issues of